The man who paces his bedroom long after midnight, replaying every exchange with her like a worn-out cassette that never sounds quite the same. The man who discovered the silence between them could hurt more than any word she ever spoke. I'm speaking directly to you because somewhere inside you've begun to suspect something, not only about her, but about the role you've chosen to play in the theater of love. And if you don't stop to examine it, you'll remain shackled to illusions wearing the mask of devotion. Søren Kierkegaard tried to warn you, but his voice was faint, buried beneath irony and faith, suffering and doubt. And now, long after his bones turned to dust, that whisper endures. It was always meant for men like you. Kierkegaard was no cynic. He didn't despise women. He loved one deeply, Regine Olsen. But he walked away, not because he lacked desire, but because staying would have been a quiet betrayal of himself. That's where this story begins. Because most men today, they stay. They muzzle themselves in the name of love. They contort, fold, fracture, and call it maturity. They call it devotion, but Kierkegaard saw past that lie. He recognized the most dangerous risk of all, losing oneself and doing so quietly that no one notices, least of all you. And what could be quieter than the slow corrosion of a man's will in the company of a beautiful woman? A soft, nearly invisible manipulation in which you surrender your freedom bit by bit, smiling as you hand it over, convinced this is what makes you good. She doesn't have to control you outright. She only has to convince you that your sacrifice proves your worth. And you swallowed it whole? You crowned her your purpose when you were always meant to live your own? Kierkegaard called that condition despair. Not the dramatic despair that ends in tears, but the most insidious type, the despair of being unaware you're in it. He wrote, "The self in despair wants to be itself, but in isolation does not wish to be itself in relation to the power that created it." Translated, you long to be your own man, yet you yielded your identity to her validation. You hope love would make you whole, but love can't complete a man who has no idea who he is. And if you're honest, you shaped yourself around her approval like wet clay, praying she'd smile. When she didn't, you doubted your value. This is why Kierkegaard divided life into three spheres: the aesthetic, the ethical, and the religious. The aesthetic man lives for sensation, for beauty, for the intoxication of romantic fantasy. And here's the cruel twist: most modern men never leave that stage. You scroll endlessly through faces. You send good morning texts like offerings. You apologize for wounds she inflicted. Why? Because you've been taught emotionally, sexually, culturally, that your purpose is to please her, not to know yourself. You think you're choosing love, but you're only choosing distraction. Kierkegaard wrote, "The unhappy man is always absent from himself, never present to himself." Look into your reflection. Ask plainly, where did I go? You once had vision, clarity, direction. Now you're stranded, emotionally parched, waiting for her affection like rain on dying soil. And she feels it not out of malice, but instinct. A woman can sense when a man has begun to orbit her like a star that forgot how to shine. Once she sees that you need her more than she needs you, the balance shifts. You're no longer a man. You become a boy in a grown man's body, begging to be chosen. Kierkegaard knew this ache. He wrote, "My sorrow is my castle." Not because he cherished his suffering, but because suffering exposed his truth. He didn't pursue comfort, he pursued meaning. And meaning never comes from a woman's approval. It's born when you stand fully inside your own soul, even when you stand alone, especially when you stand alone. So, if you're listening, truly listening, here's your first step. Admit that you've lost yourself. Not just in her gaze or her touch, but in the part you played to keep her nearby. And as you sit there, maybe heartbroken, maybe numb, understand this: the manipulation didn't come from cruelty. It came from your willingness to trade your essence for her affection. No woman can respect the man who does that. And in your deepest honesty, you don't respect him either. There comes a moment when a man wakes up to the truth that he was never actually loved, only needed. That is the wound you carry in your silence. She didn't love you. She loved what you did for her, the reassurance, the pursuit, the validation, the story. But she didn't love your solitude, your stillness, your real self. And why would she? You never offered it, you performed. You gave her smiles you didn't feel, compromises you mislabeled as growth. And when she left, you didn't lose a soulmate. You lost the illusion you mistook for one. Kierkegaard lived this before any of us. When he ended it with Regine, he wasn't fleeing love itself. He was escaping the false self that love was forging in him. In his journals, he wrote, "I had to break with her or lose myself completely." That line isn't poetic. It's a gravestone for every man who thinks he must die in fragments to keep a woman from leaving. Make no mistake, the moment you suppress your truth to preserve a relationship, you are no longer in love. You're imprisoned inside a fiction you scripted for her approval. And here's where Kierkegaard cuts deeper. He tells us the ethical man doesn't commit to a woman first. He commits to himself. He takes responsibility, not to satisfy others, but to become whole. In either or, he warns the greatest danger. Losing oneself can pass off as quietly as if it were nothing. Every other loss, an arm, a fortune, a partner, gets noticed. Read that again. A woman may leave. Beauty will fade. But the loss of your selfhood happens while you hold hands, while you grin for photos, while you say, "I'm fine." But you aren't fine. You are scattered. You were raised to believe that being a man means serving her needs, that love requires sacrifice, that devotion requires vanishing. So you disappeared. You called it romance. It was self-abandonment, and the world applauded you. They said, "What a good man. So generous, so attentive, so giving." But Kierkegaard saw the rot underneath. He declared, "To cheat oneself out of love is the most terrible deception. It is an eternal loss without reparation." Men cheat themselves daily by choosing comfort over honesty, flattery over integrity, submission over strength. You must see that manipulation doesn't always wear a villain's mask. Sometimes it smiles sweetly and says, "I love you as you are. But can you change this little thing?" And you do. Then you change another and another, until the man you were is replaced by a polished puppet who performs loyalty without passion, compliance without pride. And eventually she grows bored. Not because she's cruel, but because you became transparent, predictable, lifeless. She didn't betray you. You betrayed yourself first. Kierkegaard called this state a sickness unto death. Not death of the body, but a collapse of the spirit. A man disconnected from the eternal flame inside him that quietly declares, "I am." In the sickness unto death, he writes, "Despair is the misrelation in the relation itself." It sounds complicated, but it's painfully clear. You are out of alignment. You forgot how to simply be with yourself. You revolve around her as if she were your sun, desperate to make her your meaning. But no woman, however radiant, can replace the sacred duty of becoming yourself. And who are you really? You are not her counselor. You are not her rescuer. You are not a spectator in the theater of her life. You are a man summoned to face his dread, to walk through the fires of solitude, to sit with unanswerable questions without running into warm arms just because the silence starts to scream. Kierkegaard believed the religious man, the final stage, is the one who submits only to the eternal, never to trends, never to the applause of the crowd, and never to a woman's conditional devotion. So why do you still kneel at her shrine? Why do you interpret her distance as a cue to try harder? Why do you believe that reclaiming her will quiet the emptiness inside you? That hollow ache has nothing to do with her. It is the voice of the self you abandoned, the self Kierkegaard pleaded with you never to surrender. Not for desire, not for approval, not for anything. You were trained to measure your worth in a woman's eyes, how brightly she smiles, how often she responds, how completely she invites you into her story. But Kierkegaard would tell you that any identity rooted in another's approval is counterfeit, a house of cards. You become a reflection of her tastes, not a revelation of your essence. And if that sounds abstract, let's make it plain. When you adjust your tone, compromise your beliefs, shrink your ambition just to keep her near, you are not loving her. You are terrified of abandonment. You aren't standing in love. You're drowning in need. In works of love, Kierkegaard dismantles the sentimental fantasies of romance. He writes, "Worldly love is egotism. self-love cunningly projected onto another object. Sit with that for a moment. He's saying most of what we call love is simply the worship of your own longing reflected in her eyes. You love how she makes you feel. You love the story she completes, but you don't see her, and more tragically, you no longer see yourself. Examine your patterns. You start every conversation. You apologize first, even when she delivered the blow. You organize every plan, soothe every mood, carry the weight of the relationship while she drifts in and out like the weather. And you still imagine this is strength. But Kierkegaard warned you about this delusion. In Either Or, he exposes the man who surrenders to aesthetic love. He who loves aesthetically loves with the tongue, not the heart. That's what you became. A mouthpiece for sentiment, a performer of affection, a prop in her drama. And here's the cruel irony. The more you gave, the more you disappeared. Not because she demanded it outright, but because you believed withholding anything would drive her away. So you offered everything, your time, your focus, your purpose. You turned into a man orbiting a woman, instead of becoming the kind of man whose gravity draws her closer. But Kierkegaard never promised an easy fix. He didn't hand you a dating playbook. He offered a mirror, a cold, honest mirror, one that shows you the truth. The only woman who can love you in fullness is the one who finds you whole without her. And that is terrifying, because most men have never tasted wholeness. They've only used love as an escape, an anesthetic, a substitute for selfhood. But real love, as Kierkegaard described it, is rooted in eternity, not in dependency. He writes, "He who truly loves his neighbor does so in obedience to God, not hormones, not fear, but an abundance within." Here's the bitter medicine. If you're in a relationship where you can't speak freely, where silence is your survival strategy, where your spirit withers to preserve harmony, you are not in love. You are in hiding. And no amount of years, no depth of intimacy, no ceremony will bless that cowardice. Kierkegaard would rather see you heartbroken and real than adored and hollow. Ask yourself, would you rather be cherished for your mask or rejected for your truth? If you hesitate, it means you're still clinging to the mask. But masks crack. Sooner or later, she will glimpse the vacancy behind your smile. And when she does, she will leave not because you weren't enough, but because you weren't authentic. And the tragedy is you always sensed it. You simply lacked the courage to stop performing. Now, Kierkegaard makes the final distinction, the one that divides the boys from the men. The religious man is the one who walks alone, not in arrogance, but in faith. The man who has faced his dread and refused to flinch. He is the man who loves but never kneels, who gives but never begs, who shares his spirit but never sells it. You, listening now, have a choice. You can keep numbing the ache by chasing her presence. Or you can let the ache swell until it becomes the fire that shapes your real self. Until you can stand up and say, I do not need her validation. I only need to become who I am. Kierkegaard called that step the leap of faith, not a leap into someone else's embrace, but a plunge into the uncharted terrain of your own being. The part of you no woman can complete because it was never hers to carry. And now the ground shakes under your justifications. Because the next truth Kierkegaard throws at you is that your anxiety, the tightness in your chest when she doesn't reply, the dread when you picture your life without her, is not a flaw you should numb. It's the threshold of your freedom. He insists that anxiety is the dizziness of liberation. Feel that vertigo. That is possibility expanding before you. An open horizon where you no longer perform her desires, but begin to author your own becoming. Every time you grab your phone to see if she's online, you're turning away from that horizon, clinging to the walls of a shrinking cell. Put the phone down. Stand in the spinning disorientation. That dizziness is your soul reclaiming its space. But dizziness alone won't deliver you. You must decide. Kierkegaard calls this moment the leap of faith. Men often misunderstand it, thinking it means blind surrender to religion or devotion to a woman. But the leap is something else. It's a plunge into radical self-trust when nothing outside you offers guarantees. It's stepping off the ledge of codependency, held up only by your integrity. He writes, faith begins precisely where thinking ends. You have dissected her words, her silences, her inconsistencies. Your analysis is exhausted. Now leap into the silence, into unverified worth, into the raw fact that you exist to be, not just to be chosen. Imagine you do leap. You refuse to plead. You refuse to explain your value. She threatens to walk away and you open the door, not out of spite, but with calm, because you finally see that any bond secured by fear is a cage. She may test you, escalate, perform her sadness, but a woman cannot manipulate a man who is ready to lose her before he loses himself. In that instant, you become what Kierkegaard called the knight of faith. An ordinary man who moves with quiet and visible power because he has let go of every counterfeit certainty. People may see nothing remarkable on the surface, but within, he has made the single most decisive choice a human can make. He has willed to be himself before God, not before anyone else. You fear this will leave you lonely? Kierkegaard answers with a paradox that should ring in your bones. The most painful state of being is remembering the future, particularly the one you will never have. The future where you stay small to keep her close, that is the phantom you will grieve if you refuse to act. Better the clean solitude of reality than the haunted comfort of an unlived life. And once you embrace solitude, something changes. Respect follows. A woman might walk away from a needy man, but she will circle back. Or if not her, someone else will, drawn to the quiet gravity of a man who stands sovereign in the storm of his own doubt. So create practices that root you beyond her. Rise before dawn and let the stillness interrogate you. Write until the page reveals your unedited truth. Train your body, not for the admiration she might offer, but to remember that your instincts matter. Read Kierkegaard aloud. His words are iron for your soul. Life can only be understood backward, but it must be lived forward. Study the wreckage of your past entanglements. Learn from them. Then walk forward without repeating them. Decide every day that no woman's affection will ever outrank your covenant with your own becoming. And when love comes again, it will receive it as a gift, not as your oxygen. Share your table, but never your spine. Offer your strength, never your surrender. Show her a man who can adore without addiction, who can cherish without chains. Such a man is immune to manipulation because manipulation thrives on the fear of loss. And you have said farewell to that fear. And here you stand at the edge where most men retreat. Not because they lack intellect, but because they lack the courage to be free. Freedom is terrifying. It demands you relinquish the crutches of blame, the seduction of victimhood, the safety of being needed. It demands that you choose fully, painfully, forever, to live as a man who does not bend for affection, but instead burns with purpose. Kierkegaard called this the most sacred task of existence, to become a self before God, not before the world. And this is your final frontier, not to win her back, not to finally be enough for her, but to finally be enough for yourself. He writes, the self is a relation that relates itself to itself, grounded transparently in the power that established it. Let that line carve you open. Because if your manhood depends on her eyes lighting up when you appear, your foundation isn't transparent. It's brittle. It means the moment she looks away, you vanish. But a man of Kierkegaard's depth, a man reborn through dread and solitude, remains visible even in the dark. He remains himself whether he is adored or forgotten. His light is internal. His worth is not up for a vote. Look back. See the boy you were. The one who sent endless texts explaining himself to a woman already gone. The one who swallowed disrespect to avoid a single lonely night. The one who believed her body was salvation, her love was a destination. You don't need to hate that boy. But you must lay him to rest. He has no place in the man you are becoming. Kierkegaard would not call this cruelty. He would call it inevitability. You cannot become whole until you sever the part of you shaped by desperation instead of truth. And here's the final whisper, the one that will linger if you ignore it. She cannot rescue you, even if she wants to, even if she swears she loves you. No woman can save a man who has made her his meaning. She will try for a while, but eventually she will grow weary of the burden. She will crave a man who walks without leaning, who desires her but does not depend, who can walk away not because he doesn't care, but because he refuses to disappear. You've heard about the one who got away. What no one tells you is that sometimes you have to be the one who walks away, not in resentment, but in loyalty to something greater than romance. Something more lasting than her approval, loyalty to your own divine unfolding. And when you live from that place, something remarkable happens. Women stop seeing you as a servant and start sensing you as a force. The dynamic shifts. The old games no longer work. Not because you outsmarted them, but because you no longer need anything from them. You've transcended. You've become your own. So walk forward now, not back. Let her memory echo without responding. Let the silence widen without filling it. Let the ache deepen without dulling it. This is your soul knitting itself back together. This is what Kierkegaard meant when he said, "Face the facts of being what you are, for that is what changes what you are." You were never meant to be her puppet, her emotional sponge, her perpetual suitor. You were made to be the fire, the mountain, the silence that doesn't beg to be understood. If this message woke something in you, if it peeled back illusions, cracked your defenses, and whispered a truth your bones already carried, don't keep it to yourself, like this video. Share it with men still sleepwalking through their relationships. Subscribe to this channel and support us through the link below if you believe content like this should exist. Because in a world that trains men to surrender themselves for love, we are here to remind you. Kierkegaard tried to warn you. And now you finally know.